This is For My Sons, a space where we equip men to lead themselves, their families, and their communities with strength and wisdom. I'm your host, Papa O, a father, a husband, a son, and a student of life. Here, we dive into all the topics that shape the development of men. Lessons, stories, and principles you can use to strengthen your family and impact your community. If you're passionate about becoming a better man, building a better family, and leaving a better world, you're in the right place. Let's jump into today's conversation. Welcome back to the For My Son podcast. And today, we take a deep breath and step into a lesson that will shape your journey as black men. And that is how to handle ignorance with strength and wisdom. Ignorance is everywhere. In the workplace, in online spaces, in the classroom, and even within your own family. It's easy to get angry or defensive, but the true test of a man is not how loud he shouts, but how deeply he thinks before he speaks. The Yoruba say, Ogbongbi igi oromodi, kud seni tuleyika, which translates as, wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one person can embrace it entirely. You see, wisdom isn't something you conquer, it's something you grow into, one conversation, one challenge at a time. This episode is about power, not the loud kind, but the quiet, unshakable type that stays with you. It's about learning when to speak, when to teach, and when to walk away in peace. So what is ignorance? Well, ignorance is a lack of knowledge, understanding, or awareness about something. It can be innocent. Some people just don't know. Or it can be willful. Someone chooses not to know. Or ignores the truth even when it's in front of them. Ignorance is not always wrapped in hatred. Sometimes it's wrapped in casual comments, assumptions, or jokes. But just because it's subtle doesn't mean it isn't harmful. It creates misunderstandings, tension, and in the long run, division. When you understand ignorance for what it is, you can choose a better response. You can learn not to carry every insult in your chest. You can learn that your identity isn't up for debate. And most importantly, you stop giving people power over your peace. So what I want to do is I want to just take a look at a couple of examples, both historically and culturally, of people who have dealt with ignorance, with strength and wisdom. All right, consider leaders like Nelson Mandela, who endured decades of systemic ignorance and responded with grace, strategy, and clarity. Even after 27 years in prison, he led with vision, not vengeance. Now that is strength. And then there's Frederick Douglass, born into slavery, yet he rose to confront ignorance with eloquence, intellect, and undeniable truth. He used speeches and his pen to dismantle lies without ever losing his composure. Now, from across the Atlantic, there's Lord David Pitt, who stood tall in British Parliament, facing racial hostility with poise and brilliance. He used politics as a platform for justice, showing that wisdom could thrive even in hostile places. Think about Paul Stevenson and the Bristol bus boycott in the UK. He didn't just argue, he organised. He worked strategically to unite communities and dismantle policies rooted in ignorance. These men didn't just survive ignorance, they transformed it into platforms for power, truth, and lasting legacy. In a world dominated by hot takes, knee-jerk opinions, and instant comment sections, we've been conditioned to believe that speed equals strength. That if you don't clap back immediately, you're weak, you're soft. That if you don't have the loudest voice in the room, you've somehow lost. But the truth is, every time you react impulsively, you hand your peace over to someone else. You give them the steering wheel to your emotions, your tone, and even your sense of dignity. Anger is natural. In fact, it's a valid emotional response to injustice, disrespect, or ignorance. But being ruled by that anger, that's where the danger lies. Because when you're constantly reacting, you're constantly dancing to someone else's rhythm. You become predictable, easy to provoke, easy to manipulate. And often that's exactly what the other person wants, your reaction. Your emotional outburst becomes their excuse, their justification, their fuel. Your fire becomes their proof. But here's what many never learn. You don't owe everyone your emotions. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't need to prove yourself and your worth to someone who's already decided not to see it. And there's a major difference between reacting and responding, and the mature man knows which one protects his peace. You see, reacting is an emotional reflex. It's instant, it's raw, and it's usually rooted in ego or pain. Now, responding, on the other hand, is intentional. It's a choice made after reflection. It's rooted in self-control, clarity, and power. Reacting often escalates the situation. Responding often diffuses it or reveals how small it was to begin with. There is nothing weak about taking a moment to assess. It takes strength to pause. It takes confidence to stay calm while someone else loses control. Every battle doesn't need your fire. Sometimes it needs your stillness. Because stillness speaks louder than rage when it's grounded in purpose. Choosing to respond instead of react means you're living with intention, not just reflex. It means you understand something that many men never learn. Energy is limited. Peace is priceless. And once you realize that, you start guarding both like your life depends on it, because in many ways, it does. Something that is important to note about reacting and responding as well is that I know that we're talking about ignorance, and we're talking about this in the context of ignorance. But very much, and I'm sure I'm going to talk about this later on, when I'm talking about relationships, this is going to be something that's going to pop up time and time again. All linked in with how you communicate, whether you're reacting to your significant other or whether you're responding to them. And as I've just said, one is definitely going to be a better, I don't want to use the word response. One is definitely going to be a better action than the other, right? So responding to a situation is always better than reacting to one. Knowledge gives you the blueprint. Applied knowledge gives you armor. Real impenetrable armor. When you know your history, not just the wounds, but the victories, the inventions, the wisdom passed down through generations, it does something to your spine. It straightens it. When you understand your value, not as defined by others, but as inherited from your people, your culture, and your faith, you no longer feel the need to defend your worth at every turn. You stop reacting to every jab or sideways comment because you're anchored. Ignorance, once seen from a place of understanding, reveals itself to be shallow. It loses its sting. It becomes something to observe, not absorb. You learn to look at the person making ignorant remarks and realize this isn't about you, it's about them. Their limited view does not limit your greatness. Their blindness does not make you invisible. You see, I unfortunately have experienced this many a time in my lifetime thus far. I'm sure I'll come across it again, but I'll just give you one story as to where there was some real ignorance that showed through. So I went to a dinner. It was a black tie dinner. Now, I'd asked the organizer. I said, "Look, would it be possible for me to come in native clothing?" Simply because I was also celebrating a wedding anniversary with my wife. I said, "Yeah, no problem." So I did. I went in my native wear. And I got there and I had this one guy that was just, he was already drunk at this point, but for the sake of a better word, he was just being completely ignorant. And, from where I am in Nigeria, where I'm from in Nigeria, there's a certain type of hat that you have, right? The Yoruba for it is flabitiaja, right? Which translates as to the hat with doggy ears, right? Anybody from Nigeria that sees that hat knows exactly which town I originate from. All right, cool. And as far as I saw, what was I wearing? I was wearing clothes I wore to my traditional wedding. And, I'm obviously really proud of it, really happy for the wedding anniversary. And he was just like, yeah, I don't like it. It's not black tie. You look like you've got a condom on your head. And what did I do? I laughed it off. That was my response. To laugh it off. Because if I had reacted, it would have just been raw, careless anger, and not only would it have sullied the night, it would have sullied my own reputation as being someone that can be easily manipulated, easily provoked. Right? Now, of course, I've spoken about this before in previous episodes. Like, you can, of course, respond with silence. I think I've said it earlier on here. You can respond in silence, or you can, respond in a way that, causes diffusion. In this case, it was laughter for me. And that was ignorant. It was crazy ignorant. I think if I'd been a younger, less mature version of myself, I'm sure I would have headbutt the guy. But what would that have gained me in the long run? There are going to be people in the world who aren't going to have the same viewpoints as you. They are going to disagree with you. With your mannerisms. With how you dress, because really it's actually a reflection of how uncomfortable they are with change that they're not necessarily used to. And because they're not open-minded enough to understand that there's more than one culture that's been integrated into the society that they're now in, that's how their frustrations will come out. I say it's unfortunate, but it's a fact of life. Okay? So it's just something I want you to be aware of. Because that absolutely takes strength in order to respond and not to react. I'm sure that there are enough news reports that have been flying around either on social media or on traditional media where somebody has reacted badly and shanked someone for some outrageous reason. Or it's not even escalated to the point of shanking. Someone's just basically just gone for a wild haymaker on somebody. Knocked somebody out. That person actually has hit their head on like the curb or something like that and, passed on. Now all of a sudden someone's gone down for manslaughter simply because you reacted in the way that you did. Okay? You are going to need mental strength, mental fortitude in this life. Okay? Anybody that tells you any different is lying to you. I'm not here to lie to you. I'm just here to try and give you the lessons, give you the tools that you need to be able to develop as a man and as a father and build a legacy. That's what I'm trying to do here. Okay? So there is strength. There is strength in responding. There is strength through understanding. Okay? Understanding brings freedom. You walk differently. You carry yourself with quiet strength. You speak less, but when you do, your words land with weight. You stop trying to prove your humanity to people who are committed to misunderstanding it. Why? Because you know that when you walk in the footsteps of giants, you are legacy in motion. You are the living evidence of survival, brilliance, and excellence. This kind of strength isn't loud. It doesn't need applause or permission. It's the type of strength that shows up in how you hold your head when someone tries to belittle you. It shows up in your silence when others expect outrage. It shows up when you choose legacy over ego. That strength becomes your compass. It steadies you during storms and saves you from shrinking just to fit someone else's comfort zone. When you walk with understanding, you walk above ignorance, never beneath it. Sometimes the most impactful move is no move at all. Just like I told you about with the dinner I spoke about earlier on. Not because you're weak, not because you're passive, but because you understand the difference between noise and strategy. Silence, when chosen intentionally, can be the loudest statement in the room. It draws attention. It creates tension. It disrupts expectations. And most of all, it keeps you in control. There is a kind of wisdom that understands timing. It knows that not everyone is ready to be taught. Some people shout not to learn, but to dominate. Some throw ignorance at you, not because they're seeking truth, but because they want your reaction. And if you offer it, they win. But if you hold your ground and stay silent, they're left exposed. Shouting at someone who refuses to be moved. You don't owe people your energy just because they try to provoke you. Every word you speak is an investment. Every emotional response has a cost. Wisdom teaches you to spend wisely. When you act with wisdom, you think long term. You stop asking, how do I win this moment? And start asking, what will echo from this moment? How will your response or your restraint affect the atmosphere around your children, around your wife, around your community? Sometimes your calmness becomes a lesson to those watching. It becomes a generational teaching tool. True power is not loud. It doesn't chase applause. It doesn't need the spotlight. It is measured, intentional, and quietly effective. It is slow to anger, quick to observe, and deliberate in its moves. Power that seeks outcomes, not attention. And when you master that kind of power, the kind rooted in wisdom, you stop being reactive and start becoming unstoppable. Let's talk about raising sons to handle ignorance. As I said, the entire premise of this podcast is for my sons, but also I'm talking to all men. Okay? Your sons are watching, always. Not just when you're teaching them something directly, but in the everyday moments. How you respond when someone cuts you off in traffic. How you carry yourself when you're disrespected at work. Especially with the fact that a lot of us are working from home. Or enough of us are working from home, right? How you hold your tongue or use it when things get tense. Children don't learn primarily by what you tell them. They learn by what you show them. You could give the most beautiful speeches about dignity, wisdom, and restraint, but if you blow up in anger every single time you feel slighted, they will learn that. If you claim to be a man of principle but react to every insult with rage or sarcasm, they'll pick that up too. Your actions are the real curriculum. Your life is the real textbook. The way you live is the way they will live, whether you intend it or not. When your son sees you handle ignorance with calm, not because you're weak, but because you're wise, he learns that power doesn't always wear a scowl. He learns that self-control is strength, not softness. That measured silence can be louder than shouting. That not every fool deserves your focus, and not every moment needs your fury. One day, your son will walk into a room where people misunderstand him. I guarantee you that will happen. Maybe because of his name, the color of his skin, his accent, or his background. That day will come. What you teach him now will decide how he walks into that room. If you prepare him early, not just with words, but with consistent modelling, he'll walk in with his head high, his dignity intact, and his spirit unshaken. Teach him to separate ignorance from identity. Help him understand that another person's prejudice is a reflection of their limitation, not his worth. Show him that while ignorance may exist all around him, it doesn't have to live inside him. Most importantly, live what you want him to become. Let him see you pray through anger, reflect before speaking, and choose peace when ego begs for war. Let him see you walk away not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Let him see you stand firm, calm, confident, and collected when others expect you to explode. Your example becomes his script. Your presence becomes his pattern. So raise him with your hands, yes, but raise him even more with your life. Because you see, one of the biggest problems that I see today in society, especially here in the 21st century, is the amount of fatherlessness that's walking around. And by fatherlessness, I mean active fathers. I'm not talking passive here. Okay? There are a lot of overly emotional men in today's society, and it's causing significant problems because they don't possess that mental fortitude. They don't have that model, that blueprint to follow. I'm not here to discuss as to whose fault is this. I'm just telling you the state of the land. Okay? So in order to not have that fatherlessness passed along to your sons, to not have any negative characteristics that might put you in a more compromising situation or set you back a bit, you need to be there to model correctly. And I stress on correctly because children learn from what they see, not from what they hear. So we've reached about the podcast where, I like to give some practical tips, or, I guess more practical tips as opposed to just theory. We'll call this, at least for now, we'll call it application and reflection. Yeah? A reflective question you could ask yourself is, where have you allowed ignorance to disturb your peace? And what did you learn from that moment? I've got 5 action steps for you as well. Number 1, this week, identify one situation where ignorance usually gets under your skin. Prepare a response ahead of time, one that's calm, clear, and powerful. Number 2, journal about your most recent encounter with ignorance. What triggered you? What did it cost you emotionally? What would you do differently next time? Number 3, practice the pause. When faced with rudeness or ignorance this week, take 3 deep breaths. Now, I'm currently telling my kids at the moment, and they're small children, I just like to add, take 10 deep breaths. But as I've said, they're younger, so they've not yet mastered self-regulation of their emotions. So at the very least, the physical act of doing 10 deep breaths, they can focus on something else, and hopefully that removes the reactionary part of their actions. Okay? So you as an adult, take 3 deep breaths before saying anything. In through the nose, out through the mouth. That's what I keep telling them. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Number 4, educate someone. Not by arguing, but by sharing a story or experience that opens their perspective. And number 5, share a calm moment with your son, younger sibling, or mentee. Talk about how to handle ignorance with wisdom and strength. Give them a real life example. And for those of you that write in journals, here's a journal prompt for you. Write about a time when you didn't react and it brought peace, or a time when you did and what it cost you. So I'll go through those 5 action steps again. Number 1, identify one situation where ignorance usually gets under your skin and prepare a response ahead of time. Number 2, journal about your most recent encounter with ignorance. Number 3, practice the pause with 3 deep breaths before you say anything. Number 4, educate someone, not by arguing, but by sharing a story or experience. And number 5, share a calm moment with your son, your younger sibling, or your mentee. So here are my closing thoughts. Ignorance will never go away, but it doesn't have to shape you. It will show up in different forms throughout your life, in careless comments, in silent assumptions, in outright hostility. But just because ignorance exists doesn't mean it has to dictate how you feel, how you move, or who you become. The people who thrive, the people who win, are not the ones who never encounter ignorance. They're the ones who choose what shapes their spirit. They protect their peace like a priceless treasure. They know that not every insult deserves attention, and not every ignorant voice deserves a response. It is never in your best interest to react to anything, and you're not obligated to respond to everything. You are not required to educate people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is smile, stand tall, and keep walking, fully aware of who you are and whose legacy you carry. Your dignity is not up for debate. Your identity is not on trial. You don't need to prove your worth. You only need to live it, fully and boldly. So walk wisely. Speak only when your words build, heal, or uplift. And above all, protect your energy. Guard your joy. Remember that you're walking in the footsteps of giants. You're part of a legacy of strength, resilience, brilliance, and grace. Let that truth sink in, and let it carry you forward with quiet confidence. Until next time. Thank you for joining me today on For My Sons. I hope today's message challenged you, encouraged you, or gave you something worth passing down. If you found value in this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a new letter, a new lesson, or a new legacy moment. Until next time, be a communications CEO. Communicate clearly, communicate early, and communicate often. This is Papa O, and I am out.